in the world fairly often. You're going to have people come to you and say, why do you believe what you believe? Why do you think that this is right? And you really need to kind of think about it before the question is asked. They thought that they had it figured out. And the reality was that Jesus came back with them with this answer. I've already told you I've graduated multiple times. In fact, since I've been back to Brady, since I came back and as the pastor of New Song, I was still finishing up my PhD. And so I finished that graduation. And that was a culmination of a long time. It was the toughest graduation I ever went through. There was a lot to get there. But the reality is that I'm still the same guy that graduated with a PhD as I was when I graduated. And nowadays, we have graduations from everything. You graduate from kindergarten to first grade, and the first grade to second grade. And then I think you're just going to start doing semesters. Hey, you graduated the semester, and it just seems like everything's a graduation now. And I love it. I mean, we get to see the kids and do some fun things, and they have their little graduation ceremonies. But there are moments where you kind of stick a stake in the ground. And I think the graduation from high school, the thing about it is it's kind of one of the, it's a major transition for most people, because that's usually when you're getting into a place of being more of an authority in your own life than you ever have before. When I got to Dallas Baptist University, that's the first place after I graduated from high school. I went to DBU and worked on my bachelor's degree. There were guys that showed up there, guys and gals that showed up there that had never really been away from home, especially being a private Christian university. There were some that showed up there and they absolutely lost their minds. Like, what are you doing? They had never had the ability to be an authority for their own lives. And they got into everything. We had this one guy, Charlie Schaefer, and this was at a time when the Dallas Cowboys were really terrible. Well, before they started winning Super Bowls. And they had gone from the Roger Staubach era, and they were on top of the world. And from the time I was entered into the knowledge of football until I got to graduating high school, they were in the playoffs like every year but one. And then they were miserably terrible for a few years. This is when they had Herschel Walker. And everyone would get chanting. We'd watch in the main area of the dorm room there, and the big screen TV. This is how big they were back then. Anyway, we'd crowd around and watch the game, and then they were terrible, and they would always be bad. But Herschel would do something, and everybody would start chanting, Herschel, Herschel. And then Charlie would take off, and he would tackle the big rubber trash can and explode and blow all over the place. And it was really dumb. It was dumb. Charlie didn't make it to the next semester. I don't ever know what happened to Charlie. I do remember that, though. And he called everybody Chief. We were the Chiefs back then. And they changed all that. Now they're the Patriots. But here's the thing. There's this transition going on. There was another guy I went to school with, and his name was Darren. So Darren and I became friends. We were doing theology together. And here's the funny thing about Darren. He always said he was 6'11" 3/4, because he didn't want to be considered a 7-footer. I'm like, I would be stretching that out. Boy, I was 7 foot. But he had always had the stigma of being extremely tall. I actually have a picture. I hope I got it in there right. This is a few years ago. We met up in Disney World. We were there, and when we lived in Florida, and took a shot there. Darren's probably stooped down, actually. We're in front of Pinocchio. I don't think he could ride all the rides. He's such a tall guy. But he was a lot of fun. In fact, I texted him this last week. He's actually the pastor at First Baptist in Midland now. And I told him I just remember in graduation coming on, and I remembered him. Here's something funny. And we used to have this Big Chief contest. Because remember, when I first got to DBU, we were the Indians. They had a politically correct get rid of that name and went to become Patriots, changed colors and everything. But our first 2 semesters, we were the Indians. We had the Big Chief contest, which was more silliness. But it was a talent show. And one of the things that we did back then is people would lip sync and stuff, and he and one of the other guys that's also now a pastor came in and they did a lip sync, and Darren was in drag as a lady. You've never seen something so funny until you've seen a 7-foot guy in drag. And I texted him, I said, how different are these times? Now there's evidence of you in drag, in pictures. And then, hey, by the way, we had Powder Puff football games in high school, and I'm in drag in our high school annual. It was a different time back then when we actually knew gender roles and we could laugh about it, but that's a whole nother subject. But here's the thing. You're going to get into the world. You're going to run into and have to make decisions all along the way. And by what authority you do things. And when you do something, if it's silly or if it's fun, and don't stop having fun. Make new friends. You're going to meet people your whole life. And this is not just for graduates. We're always meeting new people. But by what authority do we enter into relationships? And how do we build those? And there's a question of authority that we always have to run into. And then we have to choose why we do what we do. Have fun. I think we should do that. But by the same token, also know why you're doing what you're doing. We had a church that right after I got to Dallas Baptist University, I was licensed here in Brady, Texas, which was 41 years ago by First Baptist Church. Then I was a youth pastor, an associate pastor at a little bitty church in Dallas, Bartimaeus Baptist Temple. Bartimaeus was a mission church from one of the bigger churches in town. So we would drive every Sunday, and Charlotte and I, we would go, and we had this handicap van, and we'd go pick up a lot of people from these retirement homes, and some of them were handicapped, and we would get them all, and we'd bring them. We'd start early in the day, and we'd have the service with a few little people there, and we'd be there until we had the regular service, and then when we always had a meal afterwards. And we had Brother Don, who was the pastor. He was about 5.5 foot tall. He used to be taller, I'm sure, but he was a little older, a little bit scrunched over. And he was a sweet, sweet man, but he shook a little bit. And his wife, Anna Ruth, she shook a lot. And they would have these meals afterwards, and someone would have to feed her. She was a really nice person, but one of the things that she always wanted her food scalding, like bubbling hot, so she could taste it. I'm like, if it got on your hand, it would burn you. It was like the hottest food. So you remember these things and these times. And Brother Don would always every Sunday give the same sermon. And it was always the same 20 people. And it was always if you better be saved. If you're not saved, it's like a little bit of hellfire and damnation, get saved. I'm thinking, I think all these people in here, But it was a fun time. And we also had another Brother Don. He wore this powder blue leisure suit. And he looked like, he was kind of a cross between Lawrence Welk and McFly from Back to the Future. He had his hair parted, slicked over, and he sang every Sunday, and it was, he would sing, we always sang Heaven Came Down and Glory Filled My Soul. And Charlotte and I would be towards the back, and it was like we're not going to laugh this Sunday. But we always did. The pews are rocking, because it was a little bit of a show. The organist was blind. We had an organist, and she was blind, and she was older, and she had learned how to play in carnivals. Everything she did was like dun 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 dun. And our piano player was 100 years old. I'm not kidding. She was actually 100 years old, and she was classically trained. So everything she played was like. So we always had that on one side it's like, and one side, and then we had Brother Don. Heaven came down. It was just so. Make memories. As you go along, here's the deal, and this is what Brother Don would say every Sunday. One of the things he would always say is, the Lord, he's either Lord of all or he's Lord not at all. And there's truth to that. It's like you have to decide in the authority of life that you have, is he going to be Lord of everything in your life? He's either that or he's not Lord at all. He's either Lord of all or he's not Lord at all. And that's really kind of what it comes down to. It was a simple message, but there's so much truth in it. Because you're either giving him everything or you're not. And that's the question of authority. The second one is about foundation. This is point number 2. What are you building your life? On what are you building your life? Now, I'll let AI make my screens, and they were really pretty, and I didn't want to fix it. But the ending the sentence and preposition almost took me out, but I left it. So, on what are you building your life? All right. What is the foundation for your life? Because in Luke, Jesus actually brings this up to the people as well. Let me read Luke 29 through 18. He began to tell the people this parable. A man planted the vineyard and let it out to tenants. And he went into another country for a long while. When the time came, he sent a servant to the tenants so that they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat him and sent him away empty-handed. And he sent another servant. But they also beat and treated him shamefully and sent away empty-handed. He sent a third. This one also they wounded, cast out. The owner of the vineyard said, "What shall I do? I'll send my beloved son. Perhaps they'll respect him." But when the tenants saw him, they said to themselves, "No, this is the heir. Let's kill him so that the inheritance then will be ours." And they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. And what then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He'll come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When they heard this, they said, "Surely not." But he looked directly at them and said, "What then is this that is written? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces. And when it falls on anyone, it will crush them." Now, there's a lot going on in this conversation that he's having. Again, with the lawmakers and those that he's up against. He's having this conversation with them. But he's talking ultimately about a foundational issue. This is a quotation that Jesus has at the end. It's from Psalm 118:22. And then Isaiah 8:12 is kind of the lion's share of what he says. Let me read Isaiah 8. I'm going to read 12 to 14. I like this because it's so valid for today, especially this first sentence. Do not call conspiracy everything this people call a conspiracy. Thankfully, we don't have that going on anymore. Do not fear what they fear, and do not dread it. The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He's the one you are to fear. He's the one you are to dread. He'll be a holy place for both Israel and Judah. He'll be a stone that causes people to stumble and a rock that makes them fall. This is a portion of a larger piece from Isaiah, and it's prophetic. Obviously, Jesus is saying, hey, now we're running into that, and this is what's going on. He gave that whole parable of the vineyard in context, and then he applied it to this. He said that there are some people who are going to expect, and here's the thing about that story. Why would they kill the beloved son? And we look back on it now and we know that this obviously is an application to Jesus. But this is before he passed. He's telling the lawmakers and the leaders, the ones that would eventually be the primary reason that he was crucified, the ones that talked everyone else into saying, hey, this is not the guy. And yet here he was. He said, there is in this parable, he talks about each of those. And finally, the beloved son is killed. Why would they kill him? Because he is the heir. The only reason they would do that is if they believe that the vineyard keeper, the ruler of the thing, was not coming back. Because they thought, well, if we just eliminate everybody, then we'll just get to take it because there won't be anybody left. Assuming that the vineyard keeper himself would not return. And I think there are a lot of people that have looked over the centuries or time and thought, you know what? It has been a long time. And we're just going to go ahead and get ours now. Or maybe at least that we could take this vineyard in our lifetime because he may not come back. And I think a lot of people have kind of this thought that I don't know that he's really coming back. And he uses all of that and he says, okay, now here's the deal. The one the builders rejected will become the chief cornerstone. That is a reference to actually back when they built the temple, there was an odd stone that didn't work. They set it aside, and it ended up being the perfect stone. The one that they rejected ended up being the cornerstone. And the foundation of your life is immensely important. And as you've gone through now these years as graduates, as all of us, there have things that have become cornerstones, foundational issues in our life that we've just determined, I'm building on this. I believe that this right here, the one I've called an authority, this belief, this thought is the thing I'm going to build on. I'm going to build my life on that. And when you get to another group of people, whether it's at a university, just business, whatever, again, all of us would, when we go through transition in life, you're going to meet up with people on a regular basis that have a different sense of what they believe is authoritative, a different sense of what they believe is the right thing. There's something I didn't say a minute ago about the authorship or authority. It comes from the root word auctor in Latin, which actually means one of several things: a producer, a leader, a founder, or an author. The word author, if you think about it, is the basis of authority. And if God is the one who spoke all things into existence, gave us a living word, sent Jesus as that authority in our life, then there really is only one author, one finisher. There's really only one true story. And each one of us is seeking for that. But if you have any other story, any other author that you're believing in life, then your foundation is in the wrong place. I mean, that is the core of what's going on here. And Jesus is like, this is important. So, and he said, do not call conspiracy everything that they call conspiracy. It is picked up with AI generation now. Everything that comes out, true or not. I mean, how would you know even what's true? Because everything that comes out, even, it used to be like, oh, where's video evidence? Well, video evidence means nothing anymore. I mean, in fact, if you see video evidence, your first thoughts are, that's probably not true. So much so that people are going back in time over pictures and videos and like, well, none of it was ever true. And it's hard to even know what's real anymore. So what we do instead is that we have to go back to the original author. The one who is the author and the finisher of life is also the one who is the sustainer. And all of us are banking on something. The basis of belief is that you're building it on something. That's where belief comes from. That's what happens. Now, I found a couple pictures as I was thinking about foundations. And I have those pictures in there. Yeah, these are a couple of them. This is one in California. This is a $16 million oceanside mansion. And a big chunk of the cliff came off. And at this point, this guy, they did not condemn the home yet at this point. But it is really close on that one side where you see the blue tarp. This one right here is actually at Lake Whitney. I thought we'd do something closer to home. This is 2017 at Lake Whitney. There are a lot of pictures of this one online. Eventually, they just kept crumbling underneath until the house just exploded into flames and burned to pieces and fell off the cliff into the water. Now, it's sad because you look at stuff like that, and I'm sure they went in ahead of time and thought, well, we can probably skirt close to this and be okay, you know? Because what a beautiful view. I can imagine what that would be like inside. But when it goes down, you don't want to have anything to do with it. Built on a foundation that wasn't sure, it wasn't true enough. And The problem is there are a lot of things. There are a lot of parables, a lot of pictures, a lot of thoughts biblically about the foundation. Jesus says that the cornerstone, the chief cornerstone, which ultimately is Jesus, was rejected. It was originally rejected, and it became the most important part of the temple. And I think that applies to all of our lives. There were guys when I was at DBU, when we were there, you could, your dorm rooms, whatever condition you moved into, which was basically sterile white, just a box. And then those dorm rooms, cinder block boxes. When you left, it had to look the same. You were not supposed to paint or do anything else. So guys got really creative, and they started building like one by frames and put paper and material or different types of structures that they could paint, and they just created structures all around their rooms. They built lofts, and guys had, that was at a time when NES was a platform for gaming. The first Nintendo came out in the mid-'80s there. I remember, and I looked it up to say when did it hit, but in 1987, Mike Tyson's Knockout video game, which was really high-end graphics. I mean, it's just, squares moving around. Anyway, it came out, and I remember guys just setting up in their really elaborate loft bedrooms, and other guys coming over and playing Nintendo for hours and hours and hours. Not all of them graduated. My roommate and I, we ended up having a television in our room, but it was just, we were both just study freaks and stuff. But you should take some time and actually make some friends and have some entertainment, but prioritize. So here's the deal. You can have a great looking place. I mean, you can have all the bells and whistles of whatever you build in life, but the value of what you build on really why do you do whatever you're going to do? What is the ultimate purpose at the end of the day for whatever you build on? And the most important thing is building on that faith. Matthew 14, No, that's the end of that one. Let's look at point number 3. What will you do when following Jesus gets hard? Because here's the thing we run into. Things will get hard. Scripturally, we have a lot of verses. They're not like, hey, if things happen to go bad, at that time, if that happens, then go ahead and pray. Go ahead and maybe pick up a Bible then. That's really not how God's direction works. Luke 22, let's read about Peter a little bit. We're going to read about Peter who ran into a problem of his faith. This is Luke 22, 31 to 34. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demands, this is Jesus talking to Peter, by the way. Satan demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. I always read that and I'm thinking, well, that doesn't sound good, to be sifted like wheat by Satan. I'm going to opt out of that if I can. But Jesus says, but I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And my thought is always like, okay, Jesus, but you're like God. Could you just cancel the sifting instead? You're going to pray that my faith won't fail? How about, is there another way we could approach this? And when you have turned again, you're going to turn, what do you mean, I'm going to turn? Strengthen your brothers. So he already knew this about Peter. And he tells him this. Strengthen your brothers. Peter said to him, Lord, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death. And Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster's it will not crow this day until you deny me 3 times that you know me. He goes into this conversation. This is right before, this is, the Garden of Gethsemane. This is before they come and they arrest him. And Peter's like, let's go. It's on. We're going to fight to the death. He's like, well, that's not how it's going to go down. It's going to go pretty rough for you. And he's like, he even tells him before, he's like, Once you're going to turn away, and when you turn back again, you strengthen your brothers. He's like, what are you talking about? So no, it's about to get really tough in a way that you never knew, that you never imagined. And then we continue on with Peter. Let's look at Luke 22:54 to 62. Then they seized him and led him, this is Jesus, they led him away, bringing him to the high priest's house. And Peter was following at a distance. Interesting, Peter's already, like, even as everything's going down, everyone's scattered to the four winds, and what are we going to do? Mark runs away. It even tells us later that he ran away. They grabbed his cloak and pulled it off and said he ran away naked, so that's pretty rough. Peter is following at a distance. When they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them, and a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light, looking closely at him, said, "This man was with them." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I don't know him." A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." Peter said, "Man, I'm not." And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, "Certainly this man was with them, for he too is a Galilean." Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you're talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter remembered. It's funny what will jog our remembrance at times, saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and he wept bitterly. One of the things that we have to know is that as you go through this world, you're going to have situations where it's not going to be popular. I mean, by this point, it certainly was not the popular thing to be saying, "Hey, I'm a buddy of Jesus." It was great. Well, on the triumphal entry, it's like, "Hey, can I sit on the right? Can I sit on the left?" Remember that? And he said, "Oh, you're not ready to drink this cup." He knew what was coming. He knew the other side of that story. It was suffering and rejection, ultimately death was part of that story. It was on its way. Now, for us, all of us are going to run into moments in our life where whatever we believe will be challenged. And by what authority? By what foundation? But will we actually defend or believe what we do? How do we know? How do we believe what we believe, and how do we come to it? And when it gets hot, when it's not the popular thing, and I tell you what, most universities, even Christian universities, you're gonna have people that are in complete disagreement about it, whether Jesus was anybody or who God is, or whether we embrace all religions. There's A to Z. And why do we know? What do we know? What is the authority? What is our reference? Are we going back to the author, to the one who wrote? Do we trust in his word, his written word, the word of God, which is also Jesus Christ? Is that really the authority, the basis of what we do, why we do what we do? We have another time when there was a storm in life that comes along, and it is Peter again. We get lots of good Peter stories, and he's good because he's usually the one who says what everyone else is thinking. You know, everyone else is like, "Hey, just see if Peter will ask him." It's kind of like the old commercial where they had Mikey try the cereal to see if he liked it. See if Mikey likes it, you know. So here's Peter. A lot of y'all don't remember that, younger ones. Okay, never mind. There is this guy, Peter, and sometimes he was the hero in the story, and sometimes he was the one like we just read. It was a tough time. But there was a storm that came up. So what Jesus had done, he had them all across the Sea of Galilee, and he taught during the day, and then he finally said, "Okay, you guys get in the boat and head across, and I'll meet you on the other side." And I'm thinking, some of them are thinking, "Well, how are you going to get on the other side of the sea?" But okay, we're going to do whatever you say. They take off, and we're in the middle of the sea. A great storm comes up, and everything's going crazy. It must be a pretty bad one. So we pick up where Peter they see Jesus walking on the water. Is he a ghost? They're not sure. And then we have this. Peter answered him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. He said, Jesus says to him, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind and the waves, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand, took a hold of him, saying to him, oh, you of little faith, why do you doubt? And when they got back into the boat, the wind ceased. There is so much here. This is an incredible story in so many ways. I know Dan did a sermon a while back about little faith. The beauty of it is, like, if you have a faith as a mustard seed, God tells us over and over again, it's the onus of faith is not that we have to have a really big faith. We have a really big God. Our faith is little. It's little. And here's one of the things that's funny about this story right here. Peter got out of the boat. How many of us would do that? And here's something that somebody brought up just recently, and I hadn't thought about it too much and lately, but it's very good. The storm doesn't stop until they get back into the boat. I think I would have, even if I was going to walk on water, it's like, Jesus, if it's you, now you've done this before, go ahead and stop the storm, and then I'll walk to you. I don't know if any of y'all have ever tried water skiing. When I was younger, many, many years ago, we would take the girls from Girlstown, USA, and we would go down to Elephant Butte Lake, which is in the middle of nowhere, South New Mexico. I mean, beyond nowhere. It is in the middle of a desert, and there's this giant lake with cliffs on the side. The cool thing about it is that we had this the camp, and so we take all the kids out, and they would learn to ski. They had an American skier water boat that was their ski boat that had a boom on it. It would go out to the side so you could barefoot ski on this boom. And in the early morning on that lake, it was just glass. It was just smooth as glass. And if you're ever going to try to ski at all, it's beautiful. But it was also, if you're ever going to try to barefoot ski, this is the way to do it. And so you climb out there and you want it just as pristine as possible. And I'm thinking, okay, Jesus, stop the storm, because I know you can do that. Then I'll go ahead and walk out on this crystal glass, just beautiful, easy to walk on. Because I'm thinking this too. I've often thought about this. Have you been out on a lake or a bigger body of water? This is a giant body of water, and a storm is raging. I mean, you've got the pitch and the roll of the waves and whitecaps and rain and all that's going on. Was Jesus like walking, hovering above it? Was he like up to his waist, like you're walking on the beach and the water's lapping over you? Was he not getting wet, or was he getting wet? I mean, I have no idea. All we know is he's walking on the water. Was he like up and down and like, whoo-ah, you know? I don't know what that looked like. But Peter's like, hey, just call me out into the storm and I'll come to you. Man, that is a big deal. He didn't just walk on water, he walked in the midst of a storm. He didn't ask for the storm to stop first. And are we willing to walk in the storm? I think a lot of times in our faith we're like, okay, God, if you'll just calm the storm, then I'll have faith to go. And he's like, no. Satan said he wants to sift you like wheat, and I'm going to pray that your faith doesn't fail. I'm like, wow. No, I like to stop the storm first. I'm looking out going, this is going to be super hard. Can you fix everything and then make it easy for me? And he's like, no. No, the storm's part of the deal. Because how much cooler is it and you're walking in the middle of the storm? Man, this is one of the things that happens. You're going to have to face hard times. There is no way around it. And you're going to make a decision one way or another. People try to dodge faith. It's hilarious to me. because you're just moving into another realm of faith. I had a good buddy years ago. He was getting married, and one of his friends was an atheist. I've mentioned this before. He said, hey, I just want you to know he's an atheist. And I was already deep into ministry at that time. He knew that that was the basis of who I am. I said, that's great. I'd like to meet the guy. And so we met and hit it off for a while. But I didn't say anything. And after a little while, he said, I guess you know that I'm an atheist. I said, that is, yes, I've heard that. That is amazing. Tell me how you came to believe that. Because here's the thing about atheism. It's not theism. The basis of it is you tell me about your belief and I'll just talk against it. Anything is just to talk against it. You can be devil's advocate against anything. It's really not hard. But you're actually embracing something. What are you believing? Because you have a basis of belief. All the different people are atheists, are assuming that they've got it figured out. All they're doing is arguing against different stories about God. At the same time, you're embracing something. What is your thought about origin? Tell me your origin story, because there is no way to approach origin without faith, because you have to either be able to measure it or you had to be there, and you can't do either. So you come up with a faith solution for how all things began. Causation. There are all kinds of different arguments. That's a side note, but here's the deal. All of us are going to have to decide when it gets hard what we believe, what we stand on, and why. So I would encourage that. And this last point is about what will you live for? Will you live for what Jesus gave his life? So Jesus gave his life, okay? This is another preposition at the end. Anyway, Jesus gave his life. Will you live for why he gave his life? Because the gospel, the good news, the message is Jesus came, he lived, he died, he suffered, he died, and he rose again from the grave. He's the only person in religion that is a suffering servant that also died and then came back to life. There's no one else that has a story like that. It's not a great encouraging thing to say, hey, let's go serve this, and you describe it just on the front end until you know the whole story about one who came back from the dead, one who suffered. I mean, that's why in the triumphal entry, they're like, hey, can we nuzzle up to the one who's in all control and all authority, and I'll get what I want? Because that's not how it works. I've heard recently having the conversation, and people will throw it out sometimes, that God will give you the desires of your heart. You ask God, he'll give you the desires of your heart. And the way we approach that is he's not going to give you the desires of your heart. He's going to give you what you desire in your heart, but he's going to give you the desires that change your heart. Because wherever your treasure is, there will your heart be. So whatever you're putting your faith and trust in, that's where your heart goes. God says, I will give you the desires of your heart by trusting and putting your faith in God. He gives you the desires of your heart. Your desire changes. The beauty of that is he will fulfill the desires of your heart that align with that which he has placed in you. Because he has desires for you, and that when you match with his desires, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, I talk about it fairly often, he says, not my will, but yours be done. That is a constant thing that you're going to run into in life. There's going to be stuff that you don't will to do, that it doesn't make sense, that you would rather the storm stop and not have to step into it. And God says, look, I am going to be with you in the middle of this, no matter what that is. And as long as you live, you're going to do stuff like take up your cross daily. When we talked about that recently in another sermon, but to daily take up a cross, it was, we've understand now it's a symbol of Christendom, but it was one of the most horrible torture devices in human history. Even though we understand it's an empty cross and it symbolizes Jesus rising from conquering death, The reality was to say, take up your cross daily is jump in the middle of the storm and have the faith to understand that the author of everything is with you. And that foundation is the thing that you're going to need. We have this picture that Jesus was and is with us. There were criminals on the cross when Jesus was crucified, one on each side of him. I want to read the part of this story, and let's unpack it a little bit. Two others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that's called the Skull, there they crucified him. And the criminals on his right side and his left, Jesus said this, he says, in the original language, he said, Father, forgive them. He's talking about everyone around. Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And they cast lots to divide his garments, the soldiers there. People stood by watching. The ruler scoffed at him. He saved others. Let him save himself. If he's Christ of God, he's chosen one. Soldiers also mocked him, coming up, offering him sour wine, saying, if you're the king of the Jews, save yourself. There's also an inscription over him. This is the king of the Jews. One of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked him, that is the other criminal, saying, do you not fear God, since you're under the same sentence of condemnation? We indeed justly are receiving our due reward for our deeds, but this man's done nothing wrong. And the criminal says to him, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus said to him, truly I say to you, today you'll be with me in paradise. There is this word, remember, again, and there's this criminal at the end of his life who realizes everything's gone wrong. We don't know a lot of his background, but he was being crucified. And he calls out to Jesus even at the end. He's the one who recognizes in the midst of all of this, and talk about a storm. And he said, remember me. And here's the thing, over and over again, we have to remember Jesus and ask him also then to remember us. That we have to enter into whatever storms of life or stuff that we're going through and remember Jesus in every bit of it. Because we're all facing it all the time. It's a regular thing that we have. Something interesting about these two, and remember we just talked about it not long ago. James and John, when their mom, they come and say, hey, can one be on your left? Can one be on your right? And now when you enter your kingdom, and here he is, entering his kingdom, and there's one on his left and one on his right. And they are criminals. And one is railing, saying at the end of it, like, look at all this mess. I'm going out in a blaze of glory. I don't believe any of this. And he goes on with his choice. And the other calls out and says, Lord, remember me. I mean, this has obviously gone bad. And even what they're doing to him, what they're doing to Jesus. But he recognizes, even in the midst of the storm, in the middle of all that's going down, this is the Savior. And don't just be an admirer of Jesus. Here's the thing. There's a proximity to these guys. They are right there. So who's going to be on the right? Who's going to be on the left? But the proximity didn't make the difference. It was what they did with it, or what they believed, or what they pronounced. You could come to church every Sunday. That doesn't make you a Christian. You can, any more than if you decided you're going to go to the gym every day. If you don't work out, it doesn't make you healthy. The reality is that there has to be a life relationship to Jesus Christ, and we all have that opportunity. In the world, we're going to have stuff that we run into all the time, and we're just going to have to decide whether we'll remember Jesus or whether we're going to receive what the world has to say. This is a challenge for all of us. This is an ongoing, continual thing. This is a word for graduates today, but it's a word for all of us. And here's the beauty of it all. you don't have to be great. You don't have to do it right to make it happen. You just call on to Jesus. Even at your worst place, in the middle of your storm, wherever you are, that little faith is all you need because he's a big God. And it is his ability and not ours that make it work. Ultimately, it is about Jesus. He is the Savior in this situation. We lean not on our own understanding. In all our ways, we acknowledge him. He directs our path. Now, there's a way that we live that is an enjoyment, day unto day, in the middle of the storm, celebrating. Though yet for the suffering of the cross, yet I took it with great joy. This is how Jesus approached it. You're going to live in a life that you're going to have struggles. You're going to have times of joy. Live it in such a way that you have the confidence ultimately in the author of life, who is also the finisher, who is also the sustainer. He takes us all along the way. These are the 4 questions then. Who has authority over your life? Where are you placing your authority? What is the foundation of your life? What are you building on? What will you do when faith gets hard? Not if, but when. And will you live for what Jesus gave his life? Because the true gospel is understanding his death, burial, and resurrection, and be confident even in the middle of those that would be naysayers, because they're coming. And he says in the middle of that, through it all, remember me. So today, we have the opportunity to take communion. We have open communion here. That means anybody that believes that Jesus is Lord and Savior, we welcome you here. We don't grill you or decide for you. If you want to come and remember Jesus, when he's in the upper room with his disciples that night, he took bread and he broke it and said, this is my body. He took a cup, he drank it, said, this is my blood. And as often as you do this in remembrance of me. So today we just stick the stake in the ground one more time and say, I do. I embrace my faith in Jesus Christ, not because I'm great, but because he is. And I've been through stuff, but he is the conqueror. He is the author and the finisher, and I again renew my faith because I remember him. So that also I can say, when you enter your kingdom, Lord, remember me. Amen?